and welcome to the Be Smart About Art show. My name is Susan J. Mumford. I am delighted today to be here with you on the storytelling session of the Be Smart About Art show that we have been streaming kind of throughout the pandemic. And we're looking at how we'll be continuing with this program in the weeks and months to come. And we'll have news for you soon as well on that. So keep your eyes peeled. This is an interesting era, isn't it? When such as a number of people like myself, kind of jumped on board very, very quickly to essentially providing support for communities. And now we're working out what's sustainable, what can we continue to do, and there will be some element of this show that will be carrying on, and what that is, we're currently planning. And for today, I am talking about exhibition titles, Love or Hate Them, We Must Create Them. Now, this is from the Be Smart About Art book, Art is Your Life, Make It Your Living, which is comprised of the top 100 posts from the first 2 years of a weekly blog series that was published by Be Smart About Art. The actual entirety of the series went for 6 years, and essentially every single week I would write an article, and my other half, Chris King, Be Smart About Art's also in-house photographer, would take a photograph that interpreted basically the image. And at first the images weren't that exciting. In fact, if you really went back in time and looked at the original blog, you would have seen a single photograph being used on the blog for each post, but it looked really boring. Just for those of you who remember it, I'll actually see if I can find it. Actually, did we even put it in the book? Maybe it was so boring we didn't even put it in the book. No offense to Chris, he knows that. He knows that it didn't work in the long term. But by the time we got to this post, which would have been published in about, I would say, December or maybe actually January, in fact. That was probably January of 2013, if I look at when the other posts were going out. So if you can see that, there's an image of what we presented. So that was an image Chris took of me writing. That was not actually at the stage yet. That is in April of 2013 when the images got quite crazy and conceptual. So you can really do a lot of fun with blog series. And I think that's part of what's important with a storytelling episode, is to talk also about how stories are told and how to make them captivating. And I think even when you're giving talks or when you're introducing people to exhibitions or taking people through studios, finding ways of telling stories is really key. It's what connects people to essentially to lessons, to life. Instead of saying, and here's a case study, you can say, and here's a story. I mean, isn't that a different experience? And what about, instead of saying, and in this example, you instead say, and in this story? I mean, it's just very deep and unconscious, the difference of what those words invoke. One makes you go, ooh, it's a story, and that's a really human thing. And the other one, you kind of go, not quite sure. So here we are at the storytelling session, and I'm going to hopefully captivate you with this story from our book. And then we'll talk about some takeaways from this particular piece. Now, at the time I wrote the article, the recent was actually recent. It was now years ago. Here we go. Recently, I became engrossed in a conversation with a photographer friend in which we were evaluating the relationship between writing and visual art. For some pieces, having a title and concept is vital. However, this isn't always the case. Consider a classic Ansel Adams photograph of Yosemite National Park. I love Ansel Adams' work, and I really do credit my own sense of composition from looking at tons of Ansel Adams books in my local bookshop growing up. I could actually go and see original Ansel Adams photographs where I was raised. There was a local museum, I guess about a 40-minute drive away, and that was amazing. In my hometown, I mean, no galleries, no museums, nothing like that. I'm still to this day amazed, by the by, when I'm in some incredible institution in London or in New York, and I see school-aged children sitting there drawing, and I think they're so lucky. They're so lucky that they get to grow up looking at all of these pieces. I mean, just how amazing as an experience. we carry on. So here we are, Ansel Adams' piece of Yosemite National Park. So thinking about that particular, think of Ansel Adams if you know his photography. If you don't and you're watching the replay, press pause and go check it out. Otherwise, maybe search it out whilst you're watching live. The image speaks for itself, and as a lifelong Adams follower, I needn't see anything but the photograph. The addition of descriptive text, which includes location and date, does not detract. However, words are absolutely essential in one form of art presentation. All exhibitions require a title. And that actually, I'll tell you what that makes me think of. I'll keep on reading. I'll see how much I give away here. The most effective show listings in printed publications or online are titles that pique the reader's interest. Take as an example an Adams exhibition at the National Maritime Museum, Ansel Adams, Photography from the Mountains to the Sea. It isn't elaborate or ostentatious. The simple wording captures multiple audiences, drawing in those who love Adams, as well as those with a taste in photography of mountains or sea. Even though titles can be simple and straightforward, often artists, curators, and art dealers spend much time pulling out their hair over them. When I became a gallerist, I wondered if there was a custom regarding who composes exhibition titles, artist or curator. As it turns out, there is no exact formula, as is the case often with life, and it regularly varies. For solo exhibitions, it will often be a joint effort. Now, this is based on my observations and no kind of black and white guide on this. So for solo exhibitions, it will often be a joint effort between the artist and curator. Whereas for group exhibitions, the curator generally creates title with the agreement of all exhibiting artists. They could even take in ideas from the artist potentially. Overall, so long as the balance of power play, wow, that's a really big one. So long as the balance of power between an artist and curator stays even, do what feels right. And it's sometimes the case that an artist is somebody there might be an artist who just loves titles and immediately knows what the title just absolutely must be. And other times the artist may not be quite sure, but the gallery or the curator has a really good idea. My best recommendation for creating titles, don't be shy. My self-created all-time favorite has received a lot of attention over the years. Art is why I get up in the morning. It was the first phrase that struck me for a show, and after a second guessing myself and spending hours devising alternatives, I returned to it. Another personal favorite was a single invented word. It was an entire year after the show that the artist even asked me, "Is that a word?" And no, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I laughed and said it was a secret. I wonder if she still thinks about it. So there we are, exhibition titles. And I think actually other types of titles are important as well that I kind of allude to here. I allude to having titles for works of art. You've got all kinds of ways of providing a parameter, providing a context, whether it's for an exhibition or whether it's for a work of art. And so I want us to think about, and please feel free if you're watching live to ask your questions. And for those of you who are watching live or watching the replay, do make comments, provide your own examples, your own references as well. It's really interesting to share on these points. So one thing is thinking about an exhibition as a whole and why you give a title to that rather than saying, let's say my name when I was a photographer just starting out, Susan E. Johnson. Instead of saying Susan E. Johnson, recent photographs, instead saying Susan E. Johnson, abstract perspectives, London 2011. It would have actually been much older than that, London 1998. That's an okay change in the title. It's still not, I don't think, mesmerizing enough. What if you take that example of from sea to mountains or whatever it was something like that. It suddenly gives you something that you're walking into. What that does is it means that when somebody enters the exhibition, this could be online during the pandemic and the subsequent period as well, because bearing in mind we will continue seeing much more taking place online, what we're talking about is going to apply to the face-to-face world as well as the digital world as well. It immediately provides some kind of overarching concept that in which you then view the pieces. And so it's really helpful. And what you're not doing is you're not giving away too much. And I know some people go, oh, well, you shouldn't title works of art and you shouldn't do any titles at all for that matter because it just detracts and you want it completely open. Well, the thinking here is that you give enough with the exhibition title to provide that umbrella concept, and then people are able to see what they see within that. And so it's some kind of introduction into it. And then when we move on, I was actually talking in the piece as well about, say, wall labels. And I do remember attending, I think it was called Ansel Adams at 100. I think it's when he would have been 100 years old, if I remember correctly. That was at the Hayward Gallery. It was in my very early years in London, so possibly around 2001 or so. I remember my lovely paternal grandmother was still alive. She had just given me some money for my birthday or something like that. And so I bought the big fancy hardback book from the exhibition that I never would have bought otherwise. And I don't know if it was fully from her. She probably gave me, a small little gift amount, but I considered the whole book to be from my grandmother out in West Texas, who would have appreciated Ansel Adams photographs actually, in terms of sort of extreme nature landscapes, or natural landscapes. She would have identified with those images, and I'm sure would have come across his photographs in the media in her own lifetime. So I know the period when I attended that exhibition because she was still around, and she was a great storyteller. That's where I got all of this from. And I mentioned that exhibition because I remember looking at two photographs that were on the wall side by side. And now if you just glanced at these images, you probably would have gone, oh, they're two different images, but actually they came from the same negative. And myself, somebody who studied photography, if you had asked anybody when I was, say, 20 years old, oh, what does Susan do? You would have probably had a few answers that are partially very much who I am today. I was running an environmental, co-running, I should say, an environmental campaign on the university campus. I was running some groups for gender equality for women on the campus, and I was also probably primarily at the time known for doing photography. So I took wedding photographs. I was an event photographer at the university, all kinds of things to do with photography. And so I was standing there, having had this background in photography myself, and I read the little panel in this exhibition at the Hayward Gallery, and it actually explained that the two photographs were from the same negative, but printed something like 30 years apart from one another. And for anyone who follows Ansel Adams, you will know that he continued throughout his life to up his game with printing in the darkroom. And in fact, in the late 80s, when we were just beginning to see that digital was going to be something that would be in the future of photography and in the world, that he was saying how interested he was in it and how much he would like to know about it and how much he would like to pursue that. I remember watching a video in which he was being asked about it. And so you could just see, it's like you could see when you say that before my child was a twinkle in my eye, it's almost like digital was a twinkle. We were just beginning to see that over on the horizon. And he was somebody who did look forward in terms of moving forward. Humanity is always moving forward. Life is always moving forward. He was someone who captured nature in glorious ways, taking the same photographs at a spot time and time again, and getting it just right. When you looked at these two images, I was so grateful to have that explainer on the wall, because I was able to go, aha, isn't that fascinating? And I still to this day remember just standing there looking at these two photographs going, wow. You would think that there were different, that there were completely different negatives, but the original, the original shot, exact same. And it really showed you how he had come on in printing terms over a period of decades, which for someone like myself who gets bored quickly is that was massive insight, is I kind of go, wow, I could just move on from doing that because I'm bored. But no, if you stay at it, you stick to the game, you keep learning, you keep opening your eyes to possibilities, and then you do change what you're doing over time. So whether you're an artist or you're a curator or you're an academic, whatever it is, even a collector, you will continue to learn and you'll continue to evolve. And I could see that in these two photographs. And that really went to show to me that the importance of having that explainer to give why these two photographs were next to each other. Now, myself, I might have been able to see that they were the same photograph, but I do remember thinking that they were so different that it would be very easy to not realize that they were from the same negative. And I think as we are in this era now in which we are showing so much online, then actually putting that bit of extra effort into having a descriptive text, into providing more information about what the viewer is observing, not giving away the whole story necessarily, but giving some kind of background or some information that just helps you to read into it. It's a good idea, and that's bearing in mind that people are talking about a slowing down, having opportunity to pause, having opportunity to reflect. And I think because of that, if you think about not yourself, but the person on the other side of the internet, the user, as it were, maybe the collector, maybe the prospective professional partner who's looking at your works, to have some information, to be able to read more into it, to give them that opportunity, they're more likely to pause and to look than they would have been in previous times. I mean, one idea as well, knowing that, say, Instagram as a platform, the carousel posts in which you'll have one image and you've got little dots at the bottom, and you swipe through and you see the next image, and you swipe through and you see the next image. Why not do some posts in which you have an image, and then kind of like when you see an article, like let's say somebody is quoted in a publication, you might have the front image of their photograph and you can see that they've been quoted in a piece, and then you swipe through and you're able to read the article. Well, one thing you could do is have a work of art, and then you can swipe through to see some information about the piece. It's a really nice idea. And I have seen some 360-degree exhibitions, which is different from virtual reality. There seems to be quite a lot of conflating of the different types of digital experience. So VR is one type, AR is another type. MR, I just read about the other day, which is mixed reality. I'm sure we'll be learning more and more about these things in the weeks and months and years to come. And then we also separately have got, so mixed reality being a combination of those two, and then you separately have got 360-degree technology exhibitions in which it's like you're immersed within a space. You're able to sort of click on arrows that take you around, and then you can look at pictures, and you can go up and you can expand, and you're able to read little panels on the walls. So it's worth putting effort into those online presentations, bearing in mind that when people are really engaged, they're likely to slow down, and they're likely to look and to take it in. And my guess, this is not a report, but my own speculation as to why those carousel posts are so effective on Instagram is that because people spend more time engaging with those posts as they're swiping through, they're investing their time. And as a human, when you've invested your time, you're more likely to then go, right, you see it as worthy because you're spending more time on it. So it's kind of it's similar to confirmation bias. But it's not exactly, it's not like you're seeking out confirmation of what you're interested in. I was doing something in the garden in the last couple of days, and I thought, oh, I'm going to look this up. And I thought, I'm just doing confirmation bias. I'm looking to see that the thing I'm doing is correct. Somebody out in the universe is going to say, yes, absolutely, this is what you should do in this situation in the garden. And I thought to myself, yeah, I could probably find something that's absolutely the opposite view as well. So I always bear that in mind when researching anything to do with business as well. So when it comes to what that relationship is with a user and that social media post, and when we're thinking about giving some additional information, they will engage more. And I think that that's the reason why people then end up liking more, and why those posts are so effective in terms of the algorithm that Instagram certainly currently has set, which will change in time, as we know, because these things are always changing. Now, coming back, making a return to the thought of titles as well, we then come to the importance of titles of works of art. Now, there is no black and white answer on this. It's not to say that you have to have a title for a piece, but let's think about what is the role of having a title. I would think that the title of a work of art is very similar to the title of an exhibition. Now, an exhibition kind of being akin to a single work of art in which you've brought together all these individual pieces, and it could even be by one artist or by multiple artists, and it's a way of bringing it all together and saying, here's the idea behind this. So then, and again, it's more interesting instead of saying summer 2020, summer 22, whatever exhibition, to instead think about, I don't know, lockdown interiors. I'm just throwing something out there. So then when it comes to individual works of art, what can a title do, and how can you use titles to help to aid your work of art? It certainly can help to provide some kind of perspective. I mean, it could be completely abstract, the word that you're using. I mean, if I look at the bookshelf behind me, I bet I can find a word up here that I could think, yeah, I could put that on a work of art, and it would be kind of vague, but it might be sort of interesting as well. We can see this piece by my niece Ansley. That was a little while back now, but I do love seeing that. She says, "This is for you." Isn't that sweet? So let's see. I'm going to look at random titles. Okay, here's one book. It's titled Conversation Pieces. And so you could have a work of art, and it's called Conversation. What does that mean? What's the conversation about? Who is the conversation between? What if there were trees and you call it conversation? Is it talking about a conversation that took place at that site at some point in time? Is it nature speaking to one another? Is it actually the tree speaking to the sky? Is this thinking about a conversation that's going to take place? I mean, the possibilities really are endless. So you see what I mean? I mean, having a title is something that if you give it time, then you can do something, you can create something that evokes meaning for the person based on their view. So yes, the viewer could have an interpretation of the piece without anything at all, but just a little snippet, little something that's not overly descriptive could draw something even more just fabulous and fascinating, but it's still going to reflect the viewer, still going to reflect what's happening in their lives. That's how people see works of art. And I think probably as a finishing point, I think what this leads to when we're thinking about text and giving context, exhibition to pieces when you're talking about wall labels, but also titles, is then conversation that you have around works of art. And I've talked about this a lot when it comes to selling pieces. And when it comes to conversation about bodies of work or individual pieces of art, it's important to be aware of what the person you're talking with is saying. Now, this could be online again as well. A lot of artists are doing viewing room kind of interactions, conversations with collectors, curators, etc. You've got galleries arranging events that are taking place online as well. If somebody's really reading into something and they're saying, gosh, I see blah, 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 blah in that work of art, it's not necessarily your place to step in and say, well, no, actually you're wrong, and it means this. What I would recommend in that situation is to honor and be fascinated. So to honor what they're saying and be fascinated by it so that you can go, wow, that's really interesting. If they invite you to say, well, what did you mean? To feel free to explain it. And also to tread carefully. It's not to say something that isn't true, but it's to think about how much information you reveal in context of how they see it. Years ago, I heard one story. I've only heard this one time actually. There was an artist who was talking with a potential buyer at an exhibition opening, and the buyer saw one thing in this piece, and then the artist said, "Nope, it actually means this thing," and they actually lost the sell. And I remember thinking, "Oh, that was a shame," because the potential buyer really deeply was connecting with a work of art. And I think in terms of an artist being sensitive as artists, if you're going to make stereotypes, it's a beautiful generalization in my opinion, is artists potentially being sensitive. It's not to say that that's across the board or in all circumstances. We're all humans. We all have our moments. But it is listening. It's listening to what people are saying and maybe pausing having a moment of, we might call it mindfulness, we might call it being conscious, but where you go, deep breath, that went right down to my belly, and now coming out and taking my time and reflecting and just thinking about, hmm, that's not a perspective that ever would have come to my mind, but isn't that interesting? Pause. Well, thank you. That's a really intriguing view. And then carrying on the conversation and thinking about how you might contribute, but listening to what the other person is saying, not just thinking, well, they're wrong. So there's a whole conversation to be had around the conversations about works of art, the conversations about artists, conversations about bodies of work. And this is all to do with the framework that we build, the framework that we invite, the interpretations that we invite, the additions that we might offer in conversation, in writing. And you can do this both in person and online. It's fascinating. Well, that's bringing us to a close for today's storytelling session with Be Smart about art. That's been good fun. Thinking about concept and pieces and doing a bit of history, kind of what happened, what was happening in the life of Susan back in about 2001 or 2002 or so, seeing these two fabulous pieces by Ansel Adams. And it does make me think I need to go downstairs and check out that book. I still have it, and it's one of my books I'm just so pleased with, and to still have that very special memory of that being purchased as a special gift in association with my grandmother. Kind of that kind of thing is really, really special. And I still remember that moment of looking at it, and I still remember choosing the book. And it's just, yeah, it's storytelling. It's very impacting. And as I've said previously, the importance of writing down your capturing your stories is really, really key. So be sure as a takeaway to do that, and to then think about your titles and how you can collaborate with other people on titles and writing and contributions. You could always do audio, sort of a podcast about works of art as well. You're not limited to text in today's world. You could always do videos as well. Instead of writing, you could even do a video and do an automated transcription from it. That you can, there are free apps for that these days, which is just incredible what we've got available to us. I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon on the Be Smart About Art show. So go and enjoy thinking about concepts and works of art and bodies of work, exhibitions, etc. And I'll see you in the next edition. Signing out from Lewis in East Sussex. Ciao for now.